Last week, President Trump met with G7 leaders and NATO in Europe, and part of the discussions dealt with climate change and the Paris Climate Accord. Now we are learning that the president is working on a withdrawal from that Paris agreement. The president not committing to the reports, though, by saying, "I will be announcing my decision on the Paris Accord over the next few days. Make America great again." So we'll have to wait and see exactly what he has in mind. Taking a quick look at some green stocks. Why not, as we're talking about this? First Solar, SunPower closing in the red today. Tesla, though, electric battery fueled, continues to move high, up another nearly $6 at 341 today. That's Tesla. Now, joining me is Competitive Enterprise Institute energy analyst Chris Horner. Chris, thanks so much for joining us. Okay, so President Trump has yet to actually tell us officially that the U.S. is getting out of the Paris Accord. If you believe the critics and all those people who are wringing their hands right now, you know, death is just around the corner and Mar-a-Lago down in Florida is going to be underwater before you know it, right?
Right, and I wouldn't waste time believing the critics. Remember, they haven't told you, many of them probably don't know, and the media outlets not telling you probably have never asked, that there's no projected climate impact from this treaty, which it is, in the name of climate change, catastrophic man-made climate change. It's not about climate. It's as the UN's chief climate economist, yes, they have one, Otmar Edenhofer has acknowledged, this has very little to do with the environment. It's about de facto redistributing the world's wealth. I hope the president's advisors point him to Dr. Edenhofer's comments before he makes his final decision. It's not about the climate, and nobody claims it'll have a detectable impact on the climate. So our withdrawal, assuming he keeps his campaign promise, as opposed to sticking the bill on the people who got him in office,
right,
will have no detectable climate impact either.
And you love this group, Chris, the liberal billionaires. I find that hysterical. Already fear-mongering. Billionaire environmentalist Tom Steyer saying, quote, "If Trump pulls the U.S. out of the Paris Agreement, he will be committing a traitorous act of war against the American people." My goodness, if people actually stop and read this and believe it, I mean, it really stirs up something that's, I mean, you know, we talk about Kathy Griffin and what she did, but this is just complete nonsense, isn't it?
In fact, it's such nonsense, people might stop and ask, why would somebody be so extreme? Well, in this case, it might remind you that when you rob Peter to pay Paul, Paul's thrilled about it. And when you take those promises away, Paul gets very angry. A lot of people who've done very well off of this, who don't want the gravy train to end, no Mandarin wants the Mandarinate to end, and they had set up an awful lot of schemes to cash in on this through passing through the costs, or like the founder of this movement, Enron, had planned all sorts of ration coupon trading, and they bought windmill companies and so on. There are a lot of people, as President Trump nailed it with the Washington Post editorial board, by the way, a lot of people are making a lot of money off this. He didn't say that as an inherently good thing. He was addressing the rent seeking, and that's what these people are upset about. And their fortune may not come in.
And Chris, it's interesting. I think NPR had a headline that says, quoting a UN official saying that pulling out of the Paris climate deal will cost jobs. So it's even going to be a job killer. I mean, where does that come from?
Maybe UN jobs. The State Department had a great diplomatic corps in line, and their budget cuts don't support that. Don't shed a tear for any job that doesn't appear disappears because of mandates, coercion, or wealth transfers, which is precisely what this is. If you're economic, you'll do fine. If you provide reliable, abundant, affordable electricity, you'll do fine. Clearly, the ones planning on cashing in on this do not.
I want to bring in another point here. Former Republican Speaker Newt Gingrich says that the Paris climate deal actually hurts poor developing countries that simply can't afford to enforce all of these environmental regulations. To me, that seems a good point. He's right.
Right. It's eco-imperialism. In many cases, you're paying poor countries to stay poor, to not develop, or you're limiting them to the least affordable, most land-grabbing, least efficient energy technologies that were commercialized in the 80s, usually 1887, maybe 1891 for solar. So it's cruel. And by the way, it's not just the poor in poor countries. Europe is experiencing an epidemic of what they call fuel poverty or energy Energiearmut in Germany, where they popularized a phrase for all the seniors and the poor dying now that these policies have taken root by the tens of thousands. I hope President Trump's advisors remind him of that. Energy poverty, it's not a bug, it's the feature.
Well, Berlin is the capital of the European greenies, that's for sure. You know, coal and gas, say what you will, they're cheap, and people need cheap energy. So I think you made that point very well indeed. Chris Horner, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thank you.